Hi everyone, and thank you for attending this presentation. I hope you're doing well and 2021 is off to a good start for you. You're watching this video on the AAAL site, and after the conference there will be a copy available on my own website too, so please feel free to visit there if you like. The address is at the bottom of this slide, and I'll put that up again at the end of the presentation. So in today's presentation, we'll be looking at the findings and practical implications of research that I've been doing with second language teachers, more specifically teachers of English for Academic Purposes, or EAP. To start, we'll talk about some background ideas, and then I'll describe the research and the main findings. And then we'll talk about what this might mean for us in our own classrooms and programs. This recording will be about 20 minutes, and normally we would then have time for questions and answers. We'll still have questions and answers, but instead of doing it in real time, we'll use a discussion board. So please feel free to post anything there, and then I can post answers. And if you like, please feel free to email me anytime with questions too. So here's the problem that was the foundation of this research. Second language courses have a basic purpose of teaching students knowledge and skills that will help them beyond the second language classroom. With EAP courses, for example, this means teaching knowledge and skills that will help the students as they work through their academic programs. That means that whatever knowledge and skills the students learn in the EAP course, they should be able to transfer out of the course to their other courses. Now, research in educational psychology has shown that learning doesn't automatically lead to transfer. So it's possible that students learn and perform well in the EAP course, but when they leave the course, they never make use of what they had learned. In other words, they don't transfer the learning. To try to avoid this, there are things that teachers can do, but those things aren't always obvious or easy to do, and that's reflected in this quote, which says that EAP teachers can struggle with teaching for transfer. So that's the general problem I wanted to look at and to see what solutions we might be able to find. On this slide, here's a little more background about this idea of teaching for transfer. First, we can look at learning transfer as happening in two ways, called low-road transfer and high-road transfer. Low-road transfer is transfer that happens automatically, like when I get behind the wheel of a car that I've never driven before, but I'm able to drive it without any thought because everything I've learned before from driving other cars transfers automatically to this new situation because of all the similarities, like a steering wheel and foot pedals that are similar to the steering wheels and foot pedals in all of the other cars that I've driven before. But the other kind of transfer, high road transfer, is quite different because instead of being automatic, it's intentional. For example, instead of a new car, maybe I find myself sitting on a motorcycle for the first time. The motorcycle doesn't have a steering wheel or pedals, so I don't automatically transfer things that I've learned from driving cars. But when I'm on that motorcycle, maybe I intentionally think about strategies that I've used before when I've driven cars, like not getting too close to other vehicles. And I try to do the same thing on the motorcycle. In this case, transfer happens even though the two situations, cars that I've driven in the past and the motorcycle that I'm sitting on now, are not so similar. So with that in mind, there are practical suggestions out there for how to teach in ways that will help to promote low road and high road transfer. A technique for promoting low road transfer is called hugging, and that means designing instruction to be similar to target situations. So for example, if I'm teaching an EAP course and the students are engineering majors, I might try to design the EAP course so that it has similarities with the students' engineering courses, maybe similar kinds of activities and content. On the other hand, a technique for promoting high road transfer is called bridging, and that means teaching in a way that gets students to think abstractly about what they're learning and to think about how they might transfer learning. For example, in my EAP course, I might ask students to look at examples of academic writing and figure out what it is that makes those examples effective. This way, the students are coming up with abstract principles, and that kind of learning can be transferred to a wide variety of situations. And one more point on this slide is that these teaching for transfer techniques aren't unusual. Even without focusing on transfer, EAP teachers may already be using activities that are similar to target situations and may already be getting students to learn abstractly. But it may be the case that these kinds of techniques are being used only occasionally and not enough to really maximize the student's learning transfer. So with this problem and background information in mind, I put together a study based on these research questions. Do EAP teachers teach for transfer? If so, how and what struggles, if any, have they had? And to answer those questions, here's what I did. In fall 2019 and spring 2020, I contacted EAP teachers at a university and community colleges in a major metropolitan area here in the US to ask if I might be able to interview them. 26 teachers agreed, and I interviewed each of them once, mostly in person, and the final few were remote because of the pandemic. The interviews were semi-structured, so I used a set of general questions about teaching for transfer, and we had lots of flexibility to talk about their answers. And I recorded all the interviews so I could transcribe and analyze them later. So we'll take a look now at the main findings, and we'll start with the first research question, which asked, do EAP teachers teach for transfer? If so, how? And the findings showed that yes, all of these teachers described one or more specific techniques that they used to teach for transfer. And although they didn't use the terms hugging and bridging, based on their descriptions, it was clear that they were using these kinds of techniques. Most of the teachers, 92%, described techniques that looked like they fit the definition of hugging. For example, one of the teachers explained that instead of teaching the students about using MLA formatting for documenting sources, she taught them about APA formatting because they were engineering students and that's the formatting they would use in their engineering courses. And some of the teachers, 24%, described techniques that looked like they fit the definition of bridging. An example of that was that one of the teachers said she had students give presentations to teach the class about grammar rules. Rules can be quite abstract, so getting students to teach each other about grammar rules sounds like a way of getting them to think abstractly about what they're learning. And moving on, the second research question asked, what struggles, if any, have these EAP teachers had when teaching for transfer? And the findings showed that yes, they have had struggles. I grouped the struggles they described into three general categories, which we'll take a look at now. The first general category of struggles was that in some cases, the teachers felt that they were unprepared to teach for transfer. And this happened in a few ways. The first, which you can see here next to the letter A, was that the teachers said they thought they lacked some kind of relevant knowledge. For example, knowledge of students' other courses or knowledge of teaching techniques and tools. In this example from one of the interviews, this teacher said that some of the students took other courses in the area of law enforcement, but she didn't know anything about those courses. And on this slide, next to the letter B, here is another way teachers felt that they were unprepared to teach for transfer. Some said that they felt they lacked necessary resources. More specifically, they lacked time. In this interview, for example, the teacher said that there were all sorts of things she would like to do to teach for transfer, but just hadn't had the time. And moving on this slide, next to the letter C, here is one more way teachers felt that they were unprepared to teach for transfer. Some described an affective issue, in other words, something related to emotion that was getting in the way, for example, low self-confidence or high anxiety. For example, in this interview, the teacher said she wasn't confident in her ability to teach writing, so students might question some of her teaching techniques. So that's it for the first category of struggles, teachers feeling unprepared to teach for transfer. And at the top of this slide, we can see that the second general category of struggles was about the students, that in some cases they were not prepared for the teachers to teach for transfer. And the teachers talked about this in a few ways. First, next to the letter A on this slide, students were unprepared because they lacked some kind of ability, for example, writing ability, or ability to see connections between the EAP course and other courses, or ability to do particular activities in class. In this example, this teacher said that when she taught for transfer, she worried that the students might not be able to handle it because of their level of English proficiency. Moving on to the next slide, we can see next to the letter B that another way the teachers thought the students were unprepared was because of affective issues. In other words, things related to emotion, like a lack of motivation to learn or to transfer learning. In this example, the teacher said the students, who are engineering majors, don't want to take EAP courses, and they think they're not going to have to use anything they learn in the EAP course. And on this slide, next to the letter C, we can see that one more way teachers thought students were unprepared was because of a lack of resources, specifically a lack of time. In this example, a teacher said that his students are busy because some of them are taking a large number of credits per semester. So that's it for the second category of struggles, students being unprepared for the teacher to teach for transfer. And at the top of this slide, we can see that this third general category is about the curriculum, that in some cases it hinders teaching for transfer. The teachers described a few ways that this can happen, and the first of these, next to the letter A, is that the curriculum can lack specificity. This means in some cases, teachers found it difficult to teach for transfer because their students were from too many different majors. In this example, the teacher said it would be impossible to make the EAP course similar to the students' other courses because of the number of different majors his students were from. Moving along, on this slide, next to the letter B, this is another way that the curriculum can hinder teaching for transfer by having a lack of flexibility. In some cases, teachers found it difficult to teach for transfer because there were too many things they were required to cover in the course. In this example, the teacher said that she hadn't been able to do all the teaching for transfer that she wanted to because teachers were told what they had to teach. And on this slide, next to the letter C, here is one more way that the curriculum can hinder teaching for transfer, through a lack of support. For example, a lack of support from colleagues, or lack of training about teaching for transfer, or lack of practical guidelines about how to teach for transfer. For example, in this interview, the teacher said that in her institution, teachers don't form a supportive community. So that's it for the third category, the curriculum hindering teaching for transfer. And on this slide, we get a sense of how common these struggles were. The most common struggles at the top of the table were that the curriculum lacks specificity and that the students have affective issues, whereas the least common struggles were that students lack resources and teachers have affective issues. And here the color gives us a little bit more information. The blue rows are for the first general category of struggles, the teacher feeling unprepared to teach for transfer. The green rows are for the second general category of struggles, the students being unprepared for the teacher to teach for transfer. And the yellow rows are for the third general category of struggles, the curriculum hindering teaching for transfer. So we can see that in terms of general categories, the most common struggles seem to be related to the curriculum and to the students, rather than to the teacher's own preparation. So that's it for the findings, and on this final slide we can take a look at some possible practical implications of these findings. First, the findings showed that these teachers do teach for transfer, and this includes lots of examples of hugging and some bridging. So one implication in the first bullet here is that EAP teachers can be encouraged to look at what they're already doing in class because they might already be using techniques that can promote transfer. And if so, they can keep using those techniques. But they might also notice that they're using only one kind of technique, like many of the teachers in this study who were using only hugging. If so, they might try to use other techniques like bridging so they can really saturate their course with teaching for transfer. Moving to the second bullet, we also need to make sure teachers are getting feedback on their use of these techniques. Quite a few of the teachers said that they were unsure if their teaching for transfer techniques actually worked because they had no way of knowing what students did after they left the EAP course. But there might be ways to get transfer-related feedback from students while they're still in an EAP course. For example, by asking them if they are transferring learning to other courses that they're taking at the same time as the EAP course, or by asking them about ways that they plan to transfer learning to other courses in the future. This kind of information could be easy to get and might be satisfying for teachers who are working hard to teach for transfer. And for the final bullet, the findings of this research point in specific directions we could take to try to make teaching for transfer a little easier for EAP teachers. For example, to deal with a curriculum that lacks specificity, a teacher could look for ways to make the curriculum more specific. For example, by seeing if students can be grouped based on major. That way, the EAP course could be designed to match or hug the courses in the student's major, and that would help with low-road transfer. Or if that's not possible, a teacher could try to use more bridging techniques because that could lead to more high-road transfer, which could happen regardless of students' majors. The second example, to deal with students' affective issues, a teacher could use techniques for increasing transfer motivation, like making sure the students know that transfer can have benefits, like getting higher grades in other courses, and making sure that students see improvements in their EAP skills and knowledge, so they will have the confidence to transfer those skills and knowledge when opportunities come up. The third example, to deal with a curriculum that lacks flexibility, a teacher could find hugging and bridging techniques that are relatively easy to insert into classes and that don't take much time, like just asking students to brainstorm about where they think they might be able to transfer knowledge and skills outside the EAP course. And the fourth example, to deal with students' lack of ability, a teacher can use teaching for transfer techniques with whatever knowledge and skills the students need to learn. For example, if students need to focus on basic grammar, the teacher could have the students practice using a grammar structure in activities that resemble activities in their other courses, and that would be a kind of hugging. And the teacher could have the students look at examples of the grammar structure and then try to come up with the general rule on their own, and this would be a kind of bridging. Teaching for transfer techniques can be used with any kind of knowledge and skills, not only higher level academic knowledge and skills. So that's about it. That was the study, and from my angle, it's been really interesting looking at these teachers' perspectives on teaching for transfer. I hope you found this summary interesting and it's given you some useful practical ideas. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the discussion and I'll answer as quickly as I can. And I'm also happy to answer questions by email, so please feel free to email me with questions anytime too. Thanks again for listening and for any questions, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, and bye for now.